All About Relationships is an engaging, lighthearted, and practical show designed to help people improve their relationships in meaningful ways. Hosted by Dr. Don Allen, a certified Gottman therapist, as well as an advanced trainer for the Institute. He is also certified in emotion-focused therapy. With over 40 years of experience in the field of psychotherapy, Dr. Allen is here to provide expert guidance on strengthening marriages, parent-child relationships, friendships, and more. Through insightful discussions, audience call-ins, and guest experts, viewers receive real-world strategies to enhance intimacy, communication, and overall relationship satisfaction. So now, please welcome the host of All About Relationships, Dr. Don Allen.
Hello, and we're back. Thanks for joining us. We've got a really good show today. I'm excited about it. Each week, I kind of reflect on the last show. I reflect on input that I get. And one of the things that I thought was timely to do today is the name of my show, which is Being Humble, Grateful, and the Power of Forgiveness. And one of the reasons why this came around, just watching things on television, this general public folks, one of the things that I've noticed is that our society has kind of shifted a little bit. And one thing I've heard from people, not rarely, but off and on, is that people aren't talking to their buddies from high school or college anymore, or maybe they've had friends that they've had a falling out. We have words in our society now like getting erased or ghosted, those types of things. And they've been around for a while. But one of the other things I noticed when I looked at statistics is we are much lonelier in our societies now. And I was watching a show that really gave me next week's show, which I'm going to talk about kind of the media and how that plays a role in us isolating. I didn't want to do it because it has to be true 2,000 years ago and it has to be true 2,000 years from now. This kind of stuff will probably pass, but what isn't going to pass is that we are bonding animals, humans. We're socially wired to connect with other people. That doesn't mean it can fall off. That doesn't mean that we can get away from it, but it's uncomfortable. It's not something that humans like having happen. So what we're trying to do, I think, in our society, and I'll talk more about it next week, but what we're trying to do in our society is create more meaningful connection again. If you're watching it on media, you'll probably see it mostly in the school systems and creating policy. But I'm not just talking about the United States. I'm talking about places like Australia. There was another country, I'll talk about it next week, that just banned smartphones for kids under 15. But they're also looking at how they can reconnect people. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today, not with necessarily the media, but we're going to talk about the idea of getting back to rethinking humble, grateful, and the power of forgiveness. So that's what we're going to do. One of the things I always start off with is, what did we do for our relationships today? Well, this is one. You're talking to me, you're seeing me, and hopefully you're sending in some input. I always put something up, so if you're interested, you can get in touch with me. I very much am interested in that because I like this show to be interactive. I also like people to go back and watch prior shows because this show can build on itself. It doesn't have to, but it can. And again, there's a lot of just really good news for your relationships that's grounded in science. So I want you to really think about, looking back on these shows, not just you, but bring somebody special in your life that you want to improve your relationship. There's only one good relationship. There's only one good family. There's only one good marriage. So if we teach that, we can all have it. And that's why I'm so passionate about this show. And that's why I invest so much in that for you. So we're going to have some fun today. We're going to talk about those things. So it always goes into what goes into a successful relationship, what undermines relationships, and what can even destroy relationships, kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly. All right, so that's what we're going to do. So I always like to put things up just to kind of punctuate what we're going to talk about today. So here are my official questions. Number one, do you notice a pattern in your life where you hold on to past injuries and that leads to a consistent resentment of a person that you can't forgive? In other words, you start collecting the negative and you don't trust the positive. Do you ever do that? Okay. Do you know people who do? Next question. Have other people encouraged you to let go of past hurts, but it's really hard to accept influence given how much it has made you suffer in the past? Okay. Now, we're always going to talk about safety first. There are some relationships that you need to move on from, but overwhelmingly, we need to have a component in our society where we can be flexible, spontaneous, and repair those relationships that are worth keeping. Okay. So let me ask you another question. Can forgiveness be an act of strength rather than feeling like you've surrendered by doing that? Okay. So what if letting go doesn't mean giving up, but simply making space for something better? So that's the thing I want you to think about today as we go through the hour. The other thing is I'm going to answer a lot of those questions for you. So I'm excited. This is a good show, and it really gives us a lot of good things to think about. I'm actually going to spend a little more time in our fourth segment because what I do, for those of you who are just joining us, is I always have one thing at the end that we can all go out and do and have fun with. One of the reasons I do that is I want us to feel like a community, like we're all getting together, like we're all doing this and coming in for the big win. Why? Because it's not a fair fight. The way our society is kind of geared, it kind of pulls us away from the things we should be doing. And that, of course, is called drift. I've done a show on drift, but I'm actually going to have some experts come on and talk about drift in relationship to how the world has always experienced that when people have difficulty. Okay. So let's see, what have I got here? We're looking at how to hold on to our humility. How do we look at that and be humble and grateful? Okay. Because sometimes what happens is people we once felt closest to are now the farthest away. And one of the things John calls that, even if we're still connected with them, but we hold off and we don't talk to them, that's called stonewalling. Stonewalling is one of the 4 big things that causes people to break up and lose relationships. Okay, so we have to look at how old hurts and wounds, and even having our pride affected, can cause us problems. And we need to let our compassion and our own reflection at first on ourselves to begin to reach out. Okay. Well, why do we want to do that? Well, to the good, remember good, bad, ugly, to the good, letting go allows couples to grow beyond resentment and their struggles and their perfectionism. So what happens is you don't forget, but it does free us up to be spontaneous, to be relaxed, and use our superpower, which is repairing relationships, right? Look at what we did wrong and apologize for that, and have a genuine apology. The other thing is slow down so we can really hear what is so important to the other person rather than get into this attack defend idea of why they need to understand why we're right and they're wrong. What I've said many times, you don't want the kind of relationship where you get your way but you smush your partner's dreams, etc. That can extend to parents, it can extend to children, and can also extend to long-lasting relationships. I'll talk a little bit too later about when we get too isolated from other people, what kind of things are waiting for us that can potentially be really bad, okay? So what happens is that, we can get so upset with somebody. On the Gottman Relationship House, it's called negative sentiment override, which overrides the positive perspective, which is assuming the positive about our person. So what happens is that we start living in kind of a mental courtroom in our mind, and we build cases against our people rather than we build bridges for repair. This has been more and more of a trend in our society, and certainly we have this idea where, especially, I don't know, politics or whatever, that we really can go back and forth. Our society usually can have a healthy measure of this. Sometimes, especially this time of the year, if you're into college football or something like that, you could really root for your team and really root against that other team. But at the end of it, you know what? All of those people on the field are just kids or young adults, and they're just playing a football game. So we may not like it that that other team wins or loses, but it's all in good fun. It's when we erase the other person because they're voting for that team that can really get us into trouble, right? But what happens with the ugly, okay, is that it can lead to what that we call negative sentiment override, where it's interpreted through the lens of mistrust. So we start off this idea when we say "hey" to our friend, "hello." We're also thinking, okay, what's going to happen? What are they up to? What are they going to do? And it blocks the love. It blocks the camaraderie, and then it stifles or stops our ability to make new memories and create new, wonderful, priceless memories from the past. It's interesting. I'm a little older now, and one of the things I was doing the other day was talking to somebody who just went to their 50th high school reunion, and he was talking about the number of people who had passed away. Now again, high school is something that happened, a long time ago, but you still remember those people. You still remember going through an impossible time together. And then you go and you say, hey, I want to see this person or that person. You find out they're gone. We don't want to do that. We want to make sure that if we have good friends, we hold on to them and make as many shared memories as we can. The idea of the high school reunion is a cautionary tale for us, because once we lose people, we don't get them back in that way. I'm old enough now where my aunts, my uncles, my parents, my grandparents, they're all gone. And, win, lose, or draw, it doesn't matter because I can't reconnect with them on earth. So we want to make sure we take that kind of wisdom and we look at relationships and we care for them and cultivate them if we can. Now, I'm going to say again, safety first. There are some relationships you can't do that with. The other thing I would say is that, cautionary tale, sometimes relationships just have a shelf life. They just do. And that's not a bad thing either. But with the majority of the relationships that are good and people are healthy enough and you're healthy enough that you can let bygones be bygones, you can drop off grudges and reconnect, move towards spontaneous, not control, not rigid control, not chaos, but spontaneous. You just call them up and you talk about, hey, what did you make for dinner? So I want to have you all think about that. I want to have you all think about relationships that have gone by the boards that you really wish were still around and what has caused that wedge. We're going to talk about that today, okay? So remember, back to that, your superpower is humility and it's repair. Right? How do we do that? We live in a world of instant gratification now. I liken it back for some of the folks that are younger. When the first computers came out, it would take 2 minutes to boot up and it would make little sounds and everything. I often think, what would happen if your computer did that for a week now? Most people would probably jump out of their skin. They're just not prepared to wait. We want something instantly on our screen. So we live in that world now. Okay. And my joke with that, and this is my theory, nobody else's, and it's not scientific, but if you have a pop-up screen on your computer, you just get rid of it, right? Well, if somebody's getting in our way, if somebody's bothering us, we're so used to computers, they're like a pop-up screen. So we just get rid of them, right? And we live in a society that we watch what we like to watch, and those issues are reinforced by the media, by what's important. And what can happen is we can create even smaller and smaller circles of friends that agree with what we do, right? One of the reasons I love living in New York City when I was doing my residency at Columbia is that I got to ride the subway. And one of the things I loved about the subway is you saw everybody on the subway. And they were all going to wherever they were going. And you saw, people coming home from school and you saw families sitting together. I love that. When you live in places I've lived, you get in your car and you go everywhere where you're isolated. You're just in the car. I really like community transit because I get to see people. I love airports for that reason too, myself. So, you know what? I think this is probably a good stopping spot, but we're going to come back. We're going to get to the mailbag. And then on our third segment, I'm going to talk about some practical ways we can consider why we get stuck in grudges and get stuck in criticism and how we isolate ourselves. So we'll be back shortly after this commercial for the mailbag. We'll see you then.
Mike Zorek, a three-time California state champion in Greco-Roman wrestling at 114 pounds. Mike, blind since birth, was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He was a six-time national placer, including 2 seconds, 2/3, and 2/4. He also won the Veterans Folk-Style Wrestling twice at 152 pounds. In all these tournaments, he was the only blind competitor. Nancy Zorek, a creative spirit whose talents have taken her to the stage and into galleries and exhibitions in several states. Her father, a commercial artist who shared his instruments with his daughter and helped her fine-tune her natural abilities, influenced her decision to follow in his footsteps. Ms. Zorek has enjoyed a fruitful career doing what she loves. Listen Saturday mornings at 12 Eastern for the Nancy and Mike Show for heartwarming stories and interesting talk.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of The Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on The Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
All right, welcome to our second segment. I'm going to talk a little bit more from the first segment, and then we're going to go right into the mailbag. One of the things I want to talk about in terms of this being humble and repairing and having humility and not having too much pride, okay? You notice this is us. Now, again, I'm going to want to extend you all to people that you cherish and care about, but I always want to start with myself. I want to always start with, what can I do better? You know, when I have an argument with somebody, when I finish and settle down, I always say, what could I have done better? Not only in the argument, but what could I have done better in terms of what they're trying to tell me? Very, very important. That's empathy, and that's accepting influence, my theme for the day. But let me talk about some truths with regard to this, and that is, all of us have shortcomings, and all of us are flawed. All of us. I've never met a person that isn't, and certainly myself, I've got lots of things I want to work on and try to do that daily. So I think everybody's like that. And one thing great about that is it all puts us in the same boat. Okay, we're all in the same boat with that. The other thing too is we know from the Gottman research that 69% of the things that couples argue about cannot be solved. Now, a lot of people think, oh my gosh, 69%, it's hopeless. It's not that way at all. What it is you don't try to solve unsolvable problems. But what you do instead is you get curious and you ask your person, how do you see it? What do you think about it? And then in turn, they should ask you as well. So what we do is we move from what is called from gridlock, which is we're not going to solve this. Okay, we're not going to solve it, to dialoguing about our problems, right? And, I could look at that. I'm going to use football again as an example. I grew up in Ohio. And in Ohio, the big rivalry when I was a kid was Ohio State football playing Michigan football. Well, if you're from Ohio State, you don't say Michigan football. You say that team up north. Can't even use that. And they'll block out M's off of things around the campus because it stands for maybe Michigan. And it should be all in good fun. It should be all nice and well received at the end of the game. We'll get you next year kind of thing. But the reason I mention that is you're probably not going to talk a Michigan fan out of being a Michigan fan, and you're probably not going to talk an Ohio State fan out of being an Ohio State fan. right? And we have other ones all over the United States, and the rivalries can be classic. And again, hopefully they're in good fun. But what I'm saying is that's one of those perpetual problems. You're not going to convince somebody to like the other team. Now, if we lose our friendship over it, listen to my show. Okay. Because, that's out of hand, right? That's out of hand. So 69% of things we know we're not going to be able to solve. So let's have some humility with that, first off, because we're human. Masters relationships know how to dialogue about these differences and then solve the solvable problems, respecting, towards where we can be flexible. I have a good friend whose husband went to Michigan, and a lot of times after the game, sometime in the next week, we'd call and have some fun, but then we would talk about the game, right? So that's kind of what I mean from that. But yeah, it was a great opportunity to connect, right? So that's very important. Being humble and grateful for special and wonderful relationships allows us to be more spontaneous, potentially live longer, and have fewer illnesses, right? What also is so important about that is we create shared memories throughout our lives. Those things are priceless. You can't get those back, right? And by losing a relationship, you can't make more of them. So I really hope that you listen to this and kind of think about that. We don't want to have the negative sentiment override, right? Okay. The other thing too, and back to the ugly, haven't talked about that much, but loneliness can cause us to get more and more into distractions that aren't good for us. When we don't have those healthy, connected relationships and we fall short of those, there are things waiting for us: overusing the media, drinking, pornography, and the list goes on, right? So we don't want to become an island and then need these kind of distractions to kind of affect us. I want to use the word narcotize, but to reduce the pain of not having those relationships. So we also want to consider it's good for us as well. And we also want to be humble, because those things can affect us if we're not careful, because we don't have relationships. So some of the mailbag questions I was kind of like, wow, I'm going to give some to you. I don't usually go really heavy, but some of these kind of made my eyebrows go up. First one: my husband has apologized for an affair from years ago, but I can't stop replaying it in my head. He's patient. He's really shown, that he's repented, so to speak. But I hate feeling trapped in my own pain. What do I do? Well, one thing I will say for folks that are kind of relating to this at home, if you have some of these pains that have happened from something as traumatic as an infidelity, you might want to consider getting some trauma work. We have technology in our field now that we can really, really get rid of some of those things for people in a very positive way. So yes, I'm an EMDR specialist. I do EMDR work, but I'm also trained in prolonged exposure therapy. Those are two of the main ones in science that can really help couples. So if anybody's really stuck with that, you might want to consider talking to somebody professionally. But for those of you who don't, they just really stay stuck in it. One of the things that you want to do is look at I need statements. What do you need to continue to build that security in the relationship? What are some of the insecurities? How do you make it better? How do you join forces against the pain rather than hold grudges against each other or hold barriers against each other? So just really, really important. So in other words, you two become a component of helping that heal rather than just you alone. So very important. Those are some of the things that can really work. Here's another one. Dr. Allen, I've grown distance from some of my oldest friends because we just don't see eye to eye anymore, especially when it comes to what we watch and believe on the news. Okay, well, I have a feeling a lot of people have this one. And like I said, I don't like to get political, so I don't. But this is one that I see keep cropping up. But this is the example they gave. For example, one of my closest friends does not believe in global warming. And every time we talk about it, I feel my blood pressure rise. How do I stay connected to somebody I care about when our worldviews have drifted so far apart? Well, one thing caught my eye is they used that magic word, drifted. Okay. So one of the things I suggest with these things is, a lot of times it isn't global warming. It's what global warming means to them, what global warming means. But what we do is we start arguing about global warming when it's really about core beliefs about global warming. So if you ask them, can you tell me why that's so important to you? And they can really talk to you, because a lot of times people get into that mindset where it's attack, defend. But if you can get that to where people say, well, I'm really worried about our planet. I'm really worried about, our future generations. I'm worried that we're not going to have a planet that's worth living on. And then you might ask a question, well, how do you see that happening? What scares you? Now you're getting into why it's so important to them about global warming versus what people think about global warming. Because I've seen people even talk about statistics or, well, what's your data? Well, you don't have data. Well, you're talking about global warming. I don't know about you, but I know very little about global warming. I don't study the science of it. But I can listen very intently to a friend of mine that cares a lot about global warming, or maybe I care about global warming and they can listen to me about why that is. But the point is that you get to where the person really is worried, and it's usually from the heart. And once you start getting into from the heart, people can usually start to move towards friendship. Remember, make the issue, not your friend. So that's big. So that's one of the ways you can do it. But we have a lot of those. It isn't just global warming and stuff like that. So here's the last one I'm going to do. Let me check my time. Oh, we're doing good. So question number 3. I cannot forgive my adult daughter for cutting me off for a year. We're talking again, but it doesn't feel the same. One of the things that happens when we ghost or we shun, it's very rejecting. Now, we know from research that in really strong relationships, and I would put parent-daughter or parent-son relationships as one of the most bonded that you can get. We need to approximate, when we connect with them, 86% of the time, right? So if somebody texts, they get back to you. If somebody calls on the phone, you get back to them. Those are bids for connections accepted, right? The other thing is a lot of times those conversations can involve little things. It's not just, hey, I got a promotion. It's also, hey, I burnt the spaghetti, right? So you talk about that. They even had a commercial about somebody who tried to make a duck and it didn't look like a duck or something like that. But anyway, that kind of conversation is really so essential to human existence, right? And like I said, parent-child relationships are certainly among the very best. So what happens when we don't have that 33%? In other words, the 86% has fallen below 33%. We kind of go into an attachment distress, and it really affects our body. So what needs to happen in those situations is for you to start slowly building the relationship again, having opportunities to talk more, talk about light things, stay away from conflict, go more towards just learning about, what's important to your person. Talk more about just doing light things that can be fun. And as time goes on, and as the relationship starts to get built again, where you know each other's internal world, you're feeling like you can trust the fondness and admiration again, and then you've got those bids up, what can happen is that you can begin to repair that and hopefully move towards a normal relationship again. Let's go ahead and take another break. And when we come back, we'll talk about some practicals with how to be humble and grateful and build relationships to where we're doing those masters relationships. We'll see you soon.
Master of words, powerful player. What life-changing words can Dr. Janet Smith Warfield pull out of her magical toolbox that just might mysteriously open a door you never knew was there? A door to free yourself from fear forever. Transform your rage into right action. Release your guilt. Position you into a life of freedom, purpose, passion, power, and peace, all quite suddenly, unexpectedly, and almost miraculously, with no effort on your part. Join Dr. Janet on Dancing with Words, Dancing with Wisdom, as she and her guests show you how words map our experiences, immersing you in a sound bath that relaxes your muscles, opens your mind, and supports you in co-creating your extraordinary life. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness: Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals.
All right, we're back. So I hope some of those mailbag questions were poignant for you. I'm going to carry some of that over. They're just really timely. And like I said, some of those could even be hotbed issues, which is not my intention to get into. But what I do want to say is we don't want to let those hotbed issues put a wedge between relationships that should be priceless. Okay. All right. So want to talk about the idea of humble, grateful, and the power of forgiveness in our third segment. And first thing I want to talk about, and I want to harken back to last week's show, which is pitfalls on relationships and connections and why they go wrong. But I just want to talk a little bit about it before I get going. So one reason that we can have these problems in our life, and this is important because these things can carry over and continue to sabotage relationships in the future. And, you know, we've already paid once sometimes when we've had regrettable incidences that have happened in our childhood that have really affected us negatively. Okay. And a lot of people have them, right? But we can get over those. We can transcend them, usually. But one of the things I want to say is, why do we hold on to these issues and these hurts? Well, I just put a couple down from last week, and I just kind of want to talk to you about it to whet your appetite with it. You know, one of them is we can take our relationship that we're in and we can have what we call a projection of unmet childhood needs. Okay. So when something goes wrong, it reminds us of how we felt rejected as a kid. And then all of a sudden the past is in the present, and then we're fighting over something that might have been regrettable now, but it's been magnified by having something from childhood jump up. So again, from our department, we want to make sure that we're not being triggered by something and putting undue stress on the relationship we want to repair. Okay. So one of the things that can happen too is you can see people as all or none. You know, person's either wonderful, perfect, or they're awful, terrible, and nothing in between. So, you know, if we're doing that, what I always say, if it's always or never, it's probably not. Okay. If it's always or never, you know, there's probably something in between that it is, right? So we want to kind of temper kind of how we feel with our good logic about saying, well, probably not. Okay. The other thing we might do is, you know, like we mentalize in a way that catastrophizes. So for example, you know, let's say you walk in and somebody didn't get a chance to do the dishes. So you did that to me on purpose. You intentionally didn't do those dishes. Well, the fact is you don't know, right? So you might want to say, rather than that, you might want to say, oh my goodness, the dishes didn't get done and you said you were planning to do them. Did something come up? That's positive perspective. That's assuming there must have been something that went wrong versus something that they did to you. I'm not going to go into great detail with that. Watch last week's show if you want to see it. But more to the point, sometimes we bring things in that kind of predisposes us to distancing and grudges and negativity. And now we're fighting in an attack defense sort of way, something that's magnified from something that's just normal, like, I forgot to do the dishes, rats. So we want to be careful with those. Let me kind of go through these. I put some notes here. But I do want to say this, masters relationships, okay, this is our segment 3. Masters relationships and marriages, as well as securely attached people, right, seek efficient ways to repair and move towards positive perspective, right? So they say what they want, not what they don't want. They say what they feel, not what they don't feel. There's not like a harsh, invisible referee that kind of goes to power and control versus spontaneous. And what we do is we try to work towards what works. So I want to get back to being friends with you. So we have this pesky thing going on. Let's get rid of that. Let's just forget about it. Let's not forget to repair the next time, but let's not hold on to it. Let's let's let that go. So how do we make that happen? Because we always have, and I don't usually say that, but we do. We always have regrettable incidents that happen. I'm going to go to the store. My wife's going to ask me to get something, and I'm going to forget. It's going to happen, right? I'm going to get busy doing something, and I didn't get to something else I was supposed to do. It's going to happen. And it's probably going to happen that she does it. So if that's normal, we want to move towards humble and grateful. That's just human, right? So what we do is we talk about what we need to do better. The thing is, we tend to get mad at people for doing the same thing we do, right? And if you ever notice that, I'll give you an example. Let's say you make a mistake, or even better, you're driving down the road and somebody cuts you off. Somebody cuts you off, and oh my gosh, that dirty dog cut me off. I can't believe they cut me off, right? Well, you're yelling at them and you're all mad at them. And then let's say in my case, my wife says, well, Don, just the other day you were going down this road and you cut somebody off yourself. And I go, I know, I felt so bad. You notice how nice we are to ourselves? Not so nice necessarily to somebody on the road. And chances are a lot of people, if they cut me off, they just didn't see me, right? So, I mean, that's what I'm saying. How do we make sure we're as safe as we possibly can be on the road? But a lot of times when I'm angry about that, what I'm really is scared. Oh my gosh, they cut me off. I could have gotten in a wreck. That scared me, right? But we go from scared to mad, right? So what we want to do is settle down and regroup with that. Okay. So, that's one of the things that I think can get in our way. The other thing that I was just reflecting on is I notice a lot of times in some of the shows I watch, if I do watch, I don't watch much TV, but if I do watch, I kind of like some of those shows where they cook. Okay. And one of the things I notice is people who are aspiring cooks, or they're aspiring somethings, and they make a bunch of food and they do it real quick, and they only have so much time and they only have so many ingredients, and they do it. So they talk real fast because that's the way they're doing it. But then they go in front of somebody who's sitting there, and they're going to taste their food and tell them whether it's good or not. But it's judgy. It's judgy, And I notice in our society, I just said something about computers, right? Well, we want instant gratification, right? And if a pop-up screen comes up, we want to get rid of it as quickly as possible, right? But we don't want to go to a restaurant and get mad at people for not bringing us the iced tea fast enough. We don't. I mean, we might be frustrated, but you know what? That person's working and they're making a living, and it's just really, really important. But our society now, and some of it's with these shows, obviously not all of it, obviously not. But what happens is they go ahead and then they get mad because their iced tea didn't come fast enough. So they go onto the computer and they give them 1 star because that iced tea didn't come fast enough. Well, now we're affecting somebody's business, right? Or maybe we don't tip our waiter or waitress because, boy, that iced tea didn't get here fast enough. We can do that. We can do that. But what I prefer is to tip somebody well and to just give them a heads up. Just give them a heads up. You might say to the manager, hey, by the way, this was happening or that's happening. When I've done that a lot, what'll happen is the manager will say, I know we had 2 cooks didn't show up today, and oh my gosh, it's chaos back there. Oh my goodness. Well, listen, the food was really good and thanks for bringing it out. It sounds like you got here as fast as you can. Positivity. All of those 5 to 1 positives, right? 5 positives to 1 negatives, really, really important. The other thing is it makes you feel good. That's one thing that, we're talking about getting back to relationships. But I just talked about a relationship with a waiter or waitress. I talked about a relationship with a manager, and I leave there, I digest food better. I feel better. I've done something not complaining, but just a good heads up, right? And then I have restaurants I want to go back to because, again, if these restaurants don't do well, all of a sudden I don't have places to go. So it's not just with our friends and our loved ones. It's also just how do we interact with people. But like I said, we're so into the media right now. We really are. And I listen, I get drawn into it too. So I'm not criticizing anybody, but I'm saying heads up. Because like I said, these things can affect relationships, and then bad things are waiting for us when we feel isolated and alone. Okay? Really, really, really important to look at those things. And back to my theory of a pop-up screen. I don't want to take something and act impersonal to people because something's annoying me. So, okay, we'll just get rid of them. I don't have to think about them, right? And it's funny, I have a joke. I call it playing what's in the bag. And what I mean by that is, so I go to a fast food restaurant because I'm in a hurry and I got to get some food, and I order something. When I finish ordering it and I get the bag, I play what's in the bag, because a lot of times what I'm ordering doesn't happen. That's really true, especially of just the condiments they'll put on a hamburger or something like that. But again, I'm grateful to have a hamburger. I eat it. If it's that off plumb, I'll probably take it back. But my sense of it is these people are doing the best they can. And, I just kind of understand that sometimes it's hard for them to really get my order down right. So, all right, just something to think about. It's kind of like a moment to moment thing about how we want to conduct the practice of our lives. But we are being pulled and trained to kind of do it the other way. And that can go to our primary relationships. And then we have isolation. So be real careful, right? So that's good. The other thing I want to say with this, and this is just really important before we go to the 4th episode, and I just really want to slow it down a little bit, and I want you to really think about this, okay? In the scheme of life, okay, how many people really care about us? Okay, so I'll use me. How many people really care about me? How many people does it matter to them about what's going on in my life? Now, there are about 6 billion people on the planet. How many of those 6 billion people really care, you see? And that's really important. And what do I mean by that? How many people does it matter whether we go and get our dental appointment checkup? How many people really care about that? How many people go to the store for us, and as they're at the store, they look at food that we like, that we might want to eat, and they want to make it for us. And when they come home, they make us our meal, and maybe we're busy and we're going through our day, and we look and we say, oh my gosh, spaghetti and meatballs, wow, that's really good. And we just eat it, and we don't even stop to think of how much time and thought and care went into maybe whether we like spaghetti or meatballs. Or maybe we're veggies and we don't have spaghetti and meatballs, but we have spaghetti with a vegetable sauce, and it's really good because that's what we like. And somebody actually takes time and care to remember that, know that, and make sure that you have it. Maybe their favorite isn't vegetable, but they eat it with you because they know you like it. How many people can't wait for you to get home so that you can talk about something trivial that happened in your day that was important to you? How many? There's about 6 billion of us on the planet. I'm guessing it probably isn't 3 billion. I'm guessing it's probably not 1 billion. You have a handful of people that mean the world to you, that know how you are, and they love you and they care about you, and they can't imagine life without you. And you're the same. We don't have the luxury. of squandering those relationships or making them pop-up screens. When we get back, I'm going to talk to you about how to talk to some of the people that maybe you've drifted from that you would like to take a risk and get better with. So we'll see you shortly and we'll talk about that.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of The Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on The Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Master of words, powerful player. What life-changing words can Dr. Janet Smith Warfield pull out of her magical toolbox that just might mysteriously open a door you never knew was there? A door to free yourself from fear forever. Transform your rage into right action. Release your guilt. Position you into a life of freedom, purpose, passion, power, and peace. All quite suddenly, unexpectedly, and almost miraculously, with no effort on your part. Join Dr. Janet on Dancing with Words, Dancing with Wisdom, as she and her guests show you how words map our experiences, immersing you in a sound bath that relaxes your muscles, opens your mind, and supports you in co-creating your extraordinary life.
All right. Well, for those of you just joining us, and for those of you who've been around, one of the things I always like to do on my fourth segment is just do something that we all can get out there and do together. Remember, one of my big things is community. I put that thing up for you to see. If you want to contact me, please do. I very much value your opinions, and it also helps me with show prep and certainly the mailbox. So one of the things we're going to do now is something we're all going to go this week and do. And what's nice is you can always go back and visit my show and look at this show and see all of the good pointers I gave you in terms of how to do this. So here we go. Remember, safety first. You want to make sure that, that's a relationship that that can handle what you're trying to do. So one of the things I want you to do is pick one person that you have felt distance from in your relationship. I even wrote this down. Invite them to consider a new course with you. Start with your own humility and something you wish you could have done better with them. Start with you. Okay, always accept responsibility. It's the antidote for defensiveness. Then invite them to dialogue with you, not attack, defend, but to dialogue with you about a new beginning. How do we reboot the computer? How do we restart our friendship? If they agree, start with friendship. Don't start with something heavy. You don't want to walk on a balsa wood floor. Start something that can handle the weight, right? So first thing I want you to do is each of you give 5 things you like about the other person, especially if it makes them irreplaceable to you. Invite both of you to say not what you don't want, but rather to say what you would want, what you do prefer, right? Okay. So example, and I took the mailbag question, you talked about earlier. In the past, we've talked about global warming. I think it made us both feel very uncomfortable. Rather than have us agree on it, what I'd like to do is to really understand what is underneath your belief about global warming, what's underneath your concerns about global warming, and really listen to them, right? What makes global warming so important to you? Okay, after they talk about it, repeat that. And then what you want them to do is ask you, what makes sense to you about your position on the issue? But it's not you're making your argument, you're telling them why you believe what you believe. Now, if you both can listen to each other, that's accepting influence. In other words, I may agree with you, I may disagree with you, but I really want to know what you're thinking. You matter to me. I respect you, right? I am loyal to our friendship. These things should be starting to ring with you because of my past shows. So you want to do that. And when somebody cares about you, you're more likely to talk about what's going on from the heart, right? All right. So once they do that, find one thing that makes sense to you about what they're saying. It doesn't have to be something you agree with or disagree with. But if they say, I really worry about the planet because I want a wonderful world for my future family, my grandkids, my great grandkids, and you agree with that, well, boy, I really can see why we should all be worried about our kids and their kids. And well, it makes sense to me that if you're worried about global warming messing that up, I can see where that scares you. So find something that you can make sense with and give it back to them. Okay. So this allows you empathy and accepting influence, right? So that's what you're going back to. How do you agree and disagree? So what you want to do is you want to move forward with what you can agree on and what you can feel good about with that person, right? Always remember safety first, right? Safety first. So what you're hoping for at the end of that is to be able to say, I'd like to kind of rekindle our friendship if we could. And how do we do that in good ways? Those are opportunities, right? Opportunities. But remember, even though this might have gone well, you want to start where you're showing a lot of respect and a lot of kid gloves because the relationship has had owies. So you want to get back to that. The other thing is if there are things that have hurt you or whatever, you want to put guardrails in place so those kind of things don't happen. And then once you can do that, well, then, like I said, you can have a 2.0 relationship that allows better boundaries and better guardrails, but it's better. When I was a kid, I learned at a very early age, there was an expression we had, and that was you don't talk religion and politics to people. And that's exactly what I'm talking about here, right? There are things that you just can't talk about. It upsets people. So maybe part of the guardrails is we just won't talk about certain topics. Just won't talk about them. So that's good. My dad used to have an expression when I was a little kid, because when I was a little kid, I would, like make airplanes and I would make airplane noises, and he used to say this, being from Oklahoma, Texas area, he used to say, hey, Don, he said, you can stay, but that noise has got to go because I can't hear the football game, right? And I've always liked that. You can stay, but that noise has got to go. So in other words, we can have a friendship, but this noise about fighting about global warming, well, that's got to go because we're not going to agree on it. And it's better that we just protect our friendship better. So what I want you to do is I want you to look at all relationships have noise. You two together need to get rid of the noise. And then you go back to being spontaneous and enjoy relationships. And I'm going to say again, build new memories, build new ways of thinking and being together. Because like I said, back to my friend with his 50th high school reunion, some of those people weren't there. And once they're gone, it doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter what you think. And it doesn't matter what you feel. They're still gone. And you can't make new memories with them. And that is extremely regrettable. And what I want you to do is while we're all on the planet, let's enjoy each other and let's be in the here and now and just thank, goodness for our blessings and really want to continue to create those memories. So I want you to do that for me. Give me feedback and I would appreciate it. Remember, it's not a fair fight. This world is pulling us away from relationships right now, and we're going to fix it. Next week, I'm going to talk a little bit about the media. I didn't want to do it because of one of my goals to stay away from, what is not true 2,000 years ago and 2,000 years from now. But I think it's important enough a topic that I can talk about those issues and use it for examples. I'm Dr. Don Allen. Thank you very much. This is all about relationships, working towards ideal marriages and loving, lasting relationships. I really appreciate you being here, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you, and have a good day.
While all All About Relationships is educational and entertaining. It is not a substitute for therapy, counseling, or professional advice, but an informative space for learning and growth. So tune in each week for an engaging and reliable approach to your relationships, ensuring viewers with practical tools to create deeper connections in their daily lives. Whether tackling conflict resolution, emotional intimacy, or family dynamics, this show is your go-to resource for anyone looking to foster healthier, happier relationships in a supportive and lighthearted environment. Every Wednesday, 1 p.m. Eastern.